How can you break into the tabletop gaming industry? Hi, I'm Jared. This is InCharacter Games. And for the past 7 years, I've worked as a contract writer for companies such as Chaosium, Modiphius, Cubicle 7, and more. And often I get asked, how does one break into the gaming industry? So let's talk about that. I see two real routes into the industry. You can either go contract or indie. But before you do either of those, you have to do a couple of preparatory things. The first thing you have to do is to practice. You've got to figure out what it is that you're going to do within the industry, and then you've got to get really good at doing that thing. For me, it was writing, but for you, it might be art, writing, layout, social media, whatever the job that you're trying to do within the industry. You've got to get good enough at that you can earn the contracts or convince customers to buy your products based on your skills, on the thing that you've put together. Once you've practiced and built up a body of work of things that you've done just on your own, now you're ready to try to start to make it in the industry. But before you do that, there's one other thing I want you to do, and that is you've got to figure out why it is you're doing this. The reason this is so crucial is the why that you're doing it is going to help you determine what route you go about doing this. So really sit and honestly think, are you doing this for the money? Are you doing this to replace your current job? Are you doing this because you're just bursting with adventure ideas and you really have to get them on paper and put them in somebody else's hand? Are you doing this because you just want to share what you have with the world and know that other people are using your products to run games at their table or are seeing your art in game books as they're enjoying those games and so forth? So once you know why you're doing it and you've practiced doing it, now it's time to really determine how you're going to go about doing it, either contract or indie. Let's start with contract. And notice I didn't say go get a full-time job. The reason is so much of the industry is driven through contract labor that full-time jobs are exceedingly rare. Almost all writers I know are contract writers. There are a few that are full-time, but most of them are on contract. There are full-time positions out there, but I guarantee you nobody is looking for a full-time writer, a full-time artist, full-time layout person who has zero industry experience. So you're going to start, if you want to work for somebody else, you're going to start at the contract level. The way to get contracts is through making contacts. And you can really do that in two ways, in person and online. If you're going to go the in-person route, while you can use things like meetups, the most efficient way I have found and the most effective way that I've found to make in-person contacts is going to be at conventions. Now, I'm not talking about going to Gen Con or Origins. Those cons are massive. They are on a different scale. And those really, really big cons are not going to be the greatest place for you as an up and coming contractor to try to get those contracts. If you've got some time and contracts under your belt, then using those as a place to network, I'm sure is going to be more effective. But as somebody who doesn't have any contracts that you've done already, it's going to be a lot harder to make contacts at a con where the game developer you're talking with is seeing thousands and thousands of people every day. Instead, I would like to focus on mid-size cons or small to mid-size cons, not the really tiny local cons, but ones that have 500, 700, 1,000 people. Those are the size cons where you will get enough developers that show up that you'll have the opportunity to talk to people, but they are not so overwhelmed with running a booth at a con the size of Gen Con that they won't remember your name or won't remember your face. So I focus on mid-size cons. In my local area, one that's really good for this is ChupacabraCon. It's in the central Texas area where I live, and it is about 700-ish people the last time I checked, and it's got really good game designer attendance. So the chances of you being able to have a conversation with a game designer are pretty high. The way that you go about doing this is before the con, go print some business cards. Just your name and what it is you're trying to do. So mine just says Jared, writer. Okay. And then you're going to go meet people, play games, have fun. It's a gaming convention. But while you're doing that, keep an eye out for people that work in the industry. And when you are done playing a game with them, or you meet them at the booth and are having a good conversation about the game they're making and how you enjoy it and things like that, at some point, you're going to be able to say, hey, I'm really interested in working at the company that you work at. I'm interested in contract. I'm a writer. Can I give you my card? And if they say yes, then give them the card, continue the conversation, eventually ask them for their card, because then you're going to follow up. Have this conversation a few times throughout the weekend with various people that you meet. You'll get a feel for who's actually serious about contracts and who's not, or who you need to talk to. After the con is over, take all the business cards that you got, and about a week later, you need to send an email to every one of them, just following up. Hey, I enjoyed meeting you at the con. We talked a little bit about contract writing, and I would love to know if you've thought any more about any opportunities that I might be able to be a part of. You're just trying to establish that contact and establish that first contract. Once you get the first one under your belt, everything becomes a lot easier. So the other way that you could do this is to do this online. And in that regard, you're going to do the exact same steps. You need to meet somebody, have conversations with them, establish a rapport, talk about the fact that you want to do contract work with them, and then follow up a week later. Ways that you could do this. Discord, super popular these days amongst gaming communities. So get on a company's Discord, engage often with the Discord, such that, not that you stand out, you don't want to be a pest, but that it would not be out of line for you to have a conversation such as the one we're talking about with somebody that's a developer there. The other way you can do this, and this is probably the hardest one, is to just send an email to the company. Every company has a website. Every company's website has either a contact form or an email address where you can send for information about their products or info about anything about the company. And you can send that same request. I'm looking for contract work. Here's a link to my portfolio. I'd love to know if you have any opportunities coming available for somebody trying to break into the industry. Believe it or not, this does work. I personally had a company that, even though I had been working in the industry for several years, I could not crack getting past the gate of that company. Nobody that I knew somebody within that company. None of my connections across the industry were of any help. And I finally went to their website, went to their info at whatever the company name is, and sent them that email. And I got a reply. And I did a contract for them, and that turned into multiple contracts. So it can work. You just have to be willing to put yourself out there. You're probably going to get a lot of rejections throughout this process. Getting that first contract is hard, but once you do, then you've made it. You're in, right? That's all there is? No. You've got to now execute on the contract, because the first contract is probably the most important one you'll do in the industry. It is a small industry, and while there is not some super secret network cabal of people talking about you behind your back, word does spread. So once you get that contract, I want you to execute on that contract, and I want you to execute on it on time and to spec. I'll do a whole video on this later, but essentially, by delivering it on time and delivering it to spec, you are telling that employer that you're good for contracts. And the next time they need somebody, your name will be on the list. So if for some reason you're not going to be on time or you're not going to be to spec, then you need to contact whoever your contact is within the company and tell them that the moment you know. They have a plan for whatever it is you're doing. If you're doing a piece of art, they know where they're going to put it. If you're doing writing, they know how many words they've asked you to write, how many pages that's going to take up. If you come back and say, I have to blow up your plan because I'm only going to deliver half the words, then that means they either need to go find somebody else to do the other half of the words, or they need to, find some other way to fill that space within the book. They already have a book plan, and you're going to make them rework that plan or fill in the work that you haven't done. Things happen, right? Just be honest with whoever your contact is and let them know as soon as you know if you're not going to be able to deliver it on time and to spec. Hopefully you are. And that way you can work with them again and again. And the next time you go to a different company and say, hey, I would like to do contract work for you, you can say, I've also done work for this company over here. All right, so that is contract work. Next, let's talk about indie work. Indie work is a whole different ball of wax. You have to do everything. You have to write, design, layout, do art, do social media, run a business. Now, you can contract out any of those things to somebody else, but that means you're going to be paying them money. And so you're taking money out of your pocket to pay somebody to do something else for you. But you have to be responsible for all the things. If you don't do the thing or hire somebody to do the thing, it doesn't get done and your product doesn't get made. So you've got to do a lot more work if you're going to go indie. And there are different levels of going indie. On one side, you've got fully indie. You're writing your own rules, you're writing your own IP, you're setting your own game world up, you're doing everything yourself. And then on the other side, you have what I'm going to refer to as content networks. These are things like DM's Vault or some other licensing through drive-through RPG where you get to use somebody else's rules, play in somebody else's sandbox, but you're going to give drive-through RPG and the game license holder a cut of everything for the ability to do that. In between those two, there are various different other kinds of levels of indie. For example, Savage Worlds has like 3 different licenses that you can apply for. One is like a content network, all the way to like the ACE license, where you're doing things mostly indie, but you are using the Savage Worlds license. You'll have to go to Pinnacle's website and look up all the details and contact them. But point is, there's different levels in between. The other one that I see common in indie products that isn't just do it all by yourself is to use an open game license. So whether it's the OGL or the ORC license or some other open license, if you are using an open game system, then you have a leg up on what you're doing. I use the basic role-playing system for the indie game that I'm working on of Hearth and the Harrowing. And that allows me, since it's the ORC license, I can take all of the rules from basic role-playing, modify them however I want, and use them as a basis for everything that I'm working on. This gives me a little bit of a player base to pull from. Anybody who knows what BRP is, when I say I'm a BRP-based game, they're going to know what that is, and that is a small pool of players that I will be able to pull from without having to do a lot of work to get their attention, because they are already familiar with the system. So that's the different kind of levels of indie that you can consider doing, but all of them are still like you're creating the whole product, you're doing all of the work. All right, so now that you know the 2 real routes into the industry, contract or indie, you really kind of need to weigh the pros and the cons of each one. And we'll do that. And when we do that, think about what we talked about earlier about what are your goals for getting into the industry. And so once you look at those pros and cons and weigh those against your goals, hopefully you'll have a pretty good idea of which way you want to go. But if not, I'll end the video by giving you my unvarnished, if you came to me today and said, Jared, I've watched the video and I just want you to tell me which route to go, I'll tell you the way that I would go if I were going to do it all again today. All right, so the pros and cons of contracting. The number one con for contracting is that you have to get approved to do the work. You have to earn the contract before you can ever do the work. And so, like, that is going to be the biggest hurdle of not only getting the first contract, but maintaining enough contracts coming in to do whatever it is you're after. So, con number one, getting the contracts to begin with. One of the pros for contract work is that you get to stay hyper focused on what it is that you've practiced and what it is you're doing. I don't need to worry if I'm doing a writing contract for Chaosium, whether or not the art is going to be good or the layout is getting done or how that is all going to come together. Like, I just have to focus on the writing. So that's kind of freeing in that respect, that you get to just do the thing that you've practiced and that you're good at. The next con for contract work is that you only get paid once. Now, this is kind of a pro and kind of a con. Like, you do get paid. Like, unlike indie work where there's a chance you won't get paid at all, you'll get paid, assuming the company you're working for is ethical and keeping up with things. Thankfully, I've never had to deal with that. But you'll get paid, right? So you execute on that contract and then you get cut a check. And that's the last dollar you will ever see associated with that product. Now, there is a possibility you could, at some point, work for a contract that includes royalties. I've never had one in the 7 years I've worked in the industry. It's never been offered. I've also never asked, nor have I really seen it as a common thing in the industry. So, once you finish that work and they cut you the check, that's all you're going to see. I wrote a book called Order of the Stone for Call of Cthulhu, and if that book sells millions and millions of copies, I will never see another dime from Chaosium. And that's not to disparage them. That's what I signed up for. I wrote a book. I got paid for the book. I enjoyed working with them, but now it's up to them to market and sell the book and do so in perpetuity, and I will never see another dime. Now, if that were to happen, if Order of the Stone sells like mad and there's just millions of copies sold, I would hope that if I went back to Chaosium and said, hey, I want to write another book and here's my pitch, that I would be received favorably because of what happened with the last book I wrote. But that's no guarantee. So, there's kind of a limited ceiling on how much you're going to make in contract work. But one of the pros of contract work is that by working for another established company, they have an established market, they have established marketing teams, they know how to sell their products, and the chances are pretty good that your name is going to show up on a product that a bunch of people see, right? On the indie side, you have no guarantee of that. You could put it out and it could languish on DriveThruRPG forever and nobody buys it. Right? It's just the possibility that happens, right? On the contract side, if I, again, work for Cubicle 7, the chances are pretty good that somebody's going to see that. People are going to buy that. And, I worked on Imperium Maledictum, the Inquisitor guide for game masters and players and Vol adventures. And, I know the 40K RPGs are very popular, and that people are going to see that work, and so I'm very proud of having worked with them. So if your goal is to get your work in front of a lot of people, then working through another company who has an established market, an established audience, and a marketing team is going to really help you meet that goal. All right, so those are the pros and cons of contracting. Let's talk about the pros and cons of going indie. Obviously, one of the pros is there is nobody that is going to tell you can't do this, right? You're going to create a product and it is just you that gets to decide whether that product goes to market. Nobody can stop you and say, no, that product is not good enough to be released. You can't release it. Unlike on the contracting side, where there is somebody that's going to determine whether or not you get that contract. On the indie side, it's just up to you, your skills, your ability to put the thing together, and that's it. Okay? So one of the cons, though, is that you are taking all of the risk, right? You are taking all of the risk of getting this product to market. You are spending your own money to hire out for the parts that you aren't going to be able to do yourself. Even if you don't hire anybody to do anything else on the product, you're taking all the risk and using all of your time when you could be doing contract work for other people in working on a product for yourself. So you take all the risk, right? One of the pros is that the upside, if something hits, is much greater. Unlike the contract side, where you're going to make a per word amount or per art piece amount, once you have an indie product that begins to sell, after you recoup your costs, everything that you make from that point forward, it just goes to you. And so the upside and the risk are both much higher on the indie side of things. One of the cons on working on the indie side is that, as I've talked about before, you have to do all the things, and it can be exhausting, right? You have to do the writing, do the layout, hire out the artist, if in my case I'm hiring artists, do the marketing, build a business, come up with a plan, everything. You have to do all the things, or you have to hire somebody for the pieces that you're not willing to do. And it's a lot. Whereas on the contract side of things, you get to just pick something that you think you're good at and focus on that and execute on that and move on. So it can be overwhelming on the indie side of things. All right. So we've talked about the pros and the cons of going contract. We've talked about the pros and the cons of going indie. Now we've reached that point where I told you, if you came to me and said, I've heard all of this information, I've watched the video, but I really just want you to tell me what to do, what would I do? I would start contract until I learned enough about the industry and about how TTRPG products are made, and then I would go indie. I tried starting indie. I thought I could build a product without the experience of having worked in the industry, and I failed miserably. It never got off the ground. I didn't know what I was doing, and it was miserable. So I went the contract route and learned over years and years of doing contracts for other people, kind of how games are made and how these products come to market. I didn't know everything. There's many things that I didn't know because I was just a writer, but I was exposed to enough things that now I was able to, now that I have gone indie and am working on Of Hearth and the Harrowing, I was able to make the product, design the product, and be ready to do everything to make that product go to market, and had to then take on learning all of the other sides of things, business sides, how to do social media, how to do a marketing plan, how to do layout, how to get a book printed, all of these things. Those are all new to me, and I'm learning all of those. I'll talk about all of that in another video, but only after working in the contract side of things for years did I feel like I had learned enough that I could go the indie route and really make it happen. So that would be my recommendation. Start contract, learn enough about the industry that you can make a product, and then go indie if that's what you want to do. You could stay contract for the rest of your TTRPG career if you wanted to. It's up to you and, again, the goals that you have. So I hope this has been helpful. If you have questions on anything I've said today, or if maybe you got into the industry in a different way, leave that down in the comments below. If you're interested in learning more about InCharacter games and the indie games that we're making, I'll leave a link to our website in the description. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.